Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. So the Warhammer community have released a lot of articles, a lot of information from the Adepticon, and yeah, there's a lot of information to go through today. So where do we begin? Well, let's begin with this photo image. The battle has evolved. There's a new edition coming for Warhammer 40k. Hashtag new 40k. So they've broken down a lot of information for us, and I'm going to go through some of that information today, how it's going to affect us, what's going to have changed. Yeah, let's just get on with it, I suppose. So first of all, to begin, they talked about streamlining the game, which I think is a fantastic thing because, in fact, that was on my wish list. If you haven't seen the wish list video I did, how long ago was that? A month ago? 2 months ago? There was a lot of that was partly due to the fact that the game is just so... It's so complex, and especially if you're a newcomer to the game, it's like... There's just a lot to go through. There's a lot of stratagems. There was a lot of, CP and all these roles of secondary objectives. It was very difficult for a new player to begin. Now, they're streamlining the game, so there's going to be less for us to remember. That's something I have problems with in my game. I seem to forget a lot when I'm in the game. I know all my stuff, but as soon as I'm in the game, it all goes out the window and I play poorly. But there's going to be less to remember. For example, stratagems. They're now putting it down to 6 stratagems. I don't know if there's on average or there is just a restriction of 6 stratagems for your faction. That doesn't include the common generic stratagems. That's just your faction-specific stratagems. You're going to have 6 of those rather than, 2 to 4 pages of actual stratagems for your army. That's going to be a lot less to remember. There's going to be a lot less gotcha moments. When you bring out one of these stratagems to your opponent and they just go, what the heck, I don't know what that is. But yeah, all of that's going to be gone, which is, I think it's a good thing. In fact, they're going to be condensing all the army abilities, army rules, the relics, the warlord traits, the stratagems, all onto one single page for your sub-faction. So if you're playing one specific sub-faction, for example, if you're playing Ultramarines, it'll all be on one single page. If you're playing Blood Angels, or even a sub-faction to Ultramarines, I suppose, it'll be on a completely separate page. So everything will be right there, black and white, on that one page. Again, that makes it so much easier. But the big thing I got from this is they're going to be focusing more on data sheets rather than these gotcha stratagems. It's more about the data sheets, which is something that I actually, again, did mention in my wish list. In my wish list, I wanted things in the actual data sheets themselves rather than having these stratagems, and I think they're doing that. I mean, I gave an example. I'll show you later in this video when they've got an actual data sheet example of the Termagants, and there's an ability in there which kind of appears like a stratagem grid, but it's in the actual data sheet as an ability. But we'll go through that later on. What else did I take from that in terms of streamlining the game? The morale phase is now gone. It's now become Battle Shock, which is going to happen in the command phase. Now, you're not going to be losing models to this Battle Shock anymore. Well, you never did, but you're not going to be losing models to this anymore, but it's going to degrade your units in some sort of way. Maybe it's the way they hold onto objectives. Maybe it's the way they fire. I don't know, but they're going to degrade the units. The example they gave is when you're failing morale tests and you've lost loads of your units or loads of your models within that unit, and maybe you've got 1 or 2 models left, what tended to happen is those 1 or 2 models just went and hid in the corner of the board onto an objective, and they were kind of fine for the rest of the game. Whereas that isn't what they wanted to do when they incorporate the morale tests. So they've actually now brought this Battle Shock system in, which will degrade the unit. Another phase that has gone is the Psychic phase. That's no longer a phase anymore. So Psyker and Psyker abilities, they're going to happen in other phases. It depends on what the Psychic ability is. If it's a Witchfire ability, it'll probably happen in the shooting phase. If it's a buffing, if it's a blessing power, it'll probably happen in the command phase. So it's all dependent on what the power is and what their datasheet actually says. And the last part of the streamlining section is there's fewer command points in the game, which is a great thing. I hate command points. So the fact that there's fewer command points and there's fewer stratagems mean they're much more precious. So when you are using those particular stratagems, or maybe it's a reroll, it isn't just we'll just throw a command point away or get one back soon, so it doesn't matter. Whereas when you've only got a few of them, they come a lot more valuable. So that's the streamlining part of this video. The next part I want to talk about is how they've re-indexed the game. So the core rules and indexes will be digitally free. That includes all the points, all the army rules, and that is from day 1, which is fantastic. Now, unfortunately, it's going to mean that all of our 9th edition codexes, all the books that we brought, are completely going to be redundant now. So it really sucks if you play Astra Militarum right now because you've just brought a codex not long ago and it's already going to be dead. But to kind of make up for it, they're going to be giving us these indexes for free. So from day one, we're going to have all of our units in there, all the point systems, everything is going to be in there. You can play it from day one without having to wait for your new codex. Which in the previous, well, in this 9th edition, I suppose, we had the problem where there wasn't an index. They did have it in 8th edition, but not in 9th edition. So there were some older codexes that didn't quite relate to the 9th edition. They were still 8th edition codexes. I mean, you could argue the Necron codex was one of them, even though it came out just before the 9th edition. It was still, technically it was an 8th edition codex. As well as the indexes being free, they're also going to be including the Forge World units within these indexes, which I think is great. Finally, we get to see datasheets in the correct places without having to get the Imperial Armor book. That's a relief, because I do quite like to use the Forge World models. And as for detachments, they are virtually gone. I know we've started using the Arcs of Omen detachment. It's virtually gone now. What they've said is all you need to do is you just require one Warlord and a maximum of 3 units or 3 datasheets in that single detachment. And if it's a troop option, you can have a maximum of 6 of that datasheet. So not a maximum of 6 troop units, just that datasheet in particular. There's a max limit there. That's going to give you a lot more flexibility with your lists. So yeah, that's the indexing of the game. Moving on to the datasheets, what did I gather from in terms of datasheets? Well, first of all, let me show you this picture, this image here. This is how the datasheets are going to appear in the 10th edition. I think it's fantastic actually, the way they've done this. The way they presented this is really good. Now you'll see from the very top there, the order of the stats, and some of the stats are very different. In fact, there's a new one in there. Let's go through them. So the movement is as it always was, the toughness is still there, the save is there, and the wounds are there. Leadership's there as well. Although it does say leadership 8+, which I'm not sure what that means at present. Now there's a new one there called OC, which stands for Objective Control. So certain units are going to have better control of the objectives. Now what they've done is they've removed Objective Secured. For example here, the Termagants have Objective Control 2. Whereas, say for example, a Dreadnought may have Objective Control 1. So for every Termagant model that's within that objective, it's going to count as 2 models, whereas that Dreadnought will count as just 1. Now this will mean that some of the bigger and badder models, maybe Imperial Knights for example, maybe they've got a larger number for objective control. I don't really know, we've not seen those datasheets yet, but it will be a way of them having control over an objective. Rather than say having 2 Ripper Swarms taking over an objective over like a giant Titanic model, that's only one model. It was 2 versus 1 and it kind of didn't really make sense, but that's what it was in 9th edition. Also notice in the weapons area, they've broken it down to ranged weapons and melee weapons, which is nice on the eye, because before you had to sort of work out which ones are melee, which ones are ranged. I mean, it was quite easy to do, but it's now all in a nice order. Also notice the attacks has moved into the weapons area. So attacks is virtually the amount of shots you have or the amount of melee attacks you're going to have. It's all put into the weapon profile now, as well as the ballistic skill and the weapon skill. That's also moved into the weapon profile, which I think is good. And the strength has also been moved there as well. Now, previously we had like, the ballistic skill will be at the top in the datasheet profile, and then the weapon would say it's a -1 to hit. So you'd have to go back to the ballistic skill to find out what you're hitting on, and then -1 to it. They've simplified it by putting it in the weapons profile, and the same thing with the strength in fact. Before it was like strength user, strength +2. It's like, okay, +2 to what? I need to go back to the profile to then find out. I know it's quite easy to do with your eyes just moving around, but when it's nice and simple and laid out like this, I do quite like that. Another thing to notice here from this datasheet is the AP. Now what they've done is they've reset the AP. AP is now quite a rarity in the game, another thing that I asked for in the wish list. And yeah, they've reset this. I believe those flesh brawlers are actually -1 AP in 9th edition, so as you can see it's now 0 AP, so the AP will be saved for the bigger and badder weapons. And the last part of the datasheet that I want to show you today is the abilities section. Now I kind of alluded to it already in this video, but there's going to be less stratagems, and I believe they've sort of tried to not put the stratagems in the datasheet, but they've kind of done a similar thing to that. They've put an ability in the datasheet that gives that unit an actual function to the game, which is something that they didn't have before. They just had melee attacks or ranged attacks, or they were resilient and whatnot. Now each and every unit is going to have this function, this ability, which is going to be unique to that unit. So for example here, the Termagants, they've got an ability called Skulking Horrors. Once per turn, when an enemy unit ends its normal move, advance or forward move within 9 inches of this unit, if this unit is not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, it can move a normal move up to D6. So it's implying that the Termagants are quite sneaky, quite reactive. If there's an enemy unit nearby, they can either go forward or go back, and that's going to be in your opponent's turn as well. So that's just an example. Now imagine going into your codex, going into every single one of your units, and every single one of those units has their unique ability here, I think is fantastic, and it definitely is better than having stratagems cluttering our codexes. So yeah, there's going to be lots more focus on the data sheets, less focus on the gotcha moments with the stratagems. The stratagems are still going to be there. In fact, there's going to be more common stratagems. So the generic stratagems, there will be more of them, but we'll know about them. And also, because there's less faction stratagems, they'll also be quite commonly known as well. Rather than having, say, 20 stratagems, if there's only 6, most players will know what they are by now. The next point I took from that video is model resiliency. This stuck out to me because it's going to be a major factor to the game now. It's going to change quite drastically, I think. Previously, well, I keep saying previously, in this current edition of 9th edition, Strength 8 for me personally was sort of the be-all and end-all of weaponry. Like, if you had Strength 8, you can pretty much hurt anything, because Toughness 7 was where most things were, or less. Very rare there was Toughness 8 models or Toughness 9 models, with certain units had Toughness 9. But Strength 8 is no longer the best weapon going, because previously a Strength 8 weapon could obliterate like a vehicle or a monster, and that won't be the case anymore, because toughness values are changing with the bigger and badder units within the game. And they gave an example of, well, he didn't say specifically what the example was, but he said there will be toughness 11 vehicles in the game. Now, I believe on another channel there was a mention of toughness 12 vehicles. I didn't quite hear that part, maybe I skipped over that part. But the toughness is definitely going to have changed. Strength 8 weaponry going up against toughness 11, toughness 12 isn't going to be as reliable as it was. Like a weapon that previously used to wound on a 3+, maybe even a 2+, may now even be wounding on a 5+. So there's a lot more resiliency in the game between all the units, and the strength is, a lot less than it used to be. Well, in theory anyway. So that's what I gathered from the Adepticon, was it an interview, video, whatever they did. And there's a few models that they've also brought out. The Terminators from the Space Marine Codex. They've got some new Terminators. They look kind of similar to me. Maybe they're slightly bigger. It's been a while since I've got my Terminators out. And they can be Firstborn, but they're also Primaris Terminators. And of course the Termagants, which they've got a nice new model kit. I quite like them, to be honest with you. Although I didn't think there was much wrong with the old ones. It was the Hermagants that were the problem. Those things were top heavy and they just kept falling down. But I'm sure they'll also get a new kit. So guys, to be honest with you, I'm quite excited for this edition. I think they've listened to what the community want. We want simplicity. We don't want to have to go through loads of different books to find one specific rule. And just looking at that datasheet presentation alone, I think they've done a really good job with that. They're presenting it well. A newcomer is going to just pick up this game and they should be able to work out how to play this quite comfortably. And even the players that are more intermediate or even expert level, they're still going to find this game not straightforward. It's still a complex game, isn't it? At the end of the day, this is Warhammer 40k. It's never going to be a simple game. It's always going to be complex. But they have streamlined it, which is exactly what we want. So guys, that is the end of the video today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this 10th edition announcement. Is that what you would call this, an announcement? If I've missed anything, also put it down in the comments below so we can talk about it. And maybe I'll go back and find those. But other than that, guys, all that's left to say is thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.